Hey there, folks, and welcome to the next installment in this series. In this particular module, we are going to talk about a subject that might lead to a significant amount of discomfort and may really challenge us. Pretty much kind of a red pill type of conversation. And that is the victim mentality. The victim mentality is probably one of the most problematic mentalities in the form of dysfunction to date. And it appears to also really poison us inside when we're not careful. So let's get into it. So the first thing about the victim mentality is this. When we don't manage our emotions upon being victimized by misconduct, we can end up making that pain our identity. And that's one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves, is making our own pain our identity and just reliving that stuff over and over. Now, there are some cases to where there is significant trauma that makes it difficult to move on from it. And I'm not knocking that issue. But I'm saying as much as we can, let's try to mitigate it. That's all I'm saying. So let's go into this a little bit. For one thing, and I just mentioned, and I'm going to say it again, this does not nullify the reality of what we went through. Us trying to get over it does not nullify the reality of what we went through. It absolutely did happen. It was wrong that we were harmed. It was wrong that we were mistreated. And it was absolutely wrong that we were abused. But do we have to remain in the victim mentality? Do we have to remain a victim? And do we want to remain a victim? Now, this doesn't mean we can't vent, but even when we're venting, it should not be where we're having so many repetitive venting sessions and we're not getting better. If we're having repetitive venting sessions and we are not healing, there's a problem. So again, with the question warranted before, why stay in a victim status after the incident has ended? Well, for one, there are some conveniences that often happen when we take the victim status. We get attention, we get sympathy, and we even receive certain passes or immunities to certain things, which does not mean they are legitimate. It just means those individuals who have chosen to give us a pass have done so. But that doesn't necessarily mean that our reckless behavior is legitimate just because we get a pass. So what happens when we choose to stay in the victim status? We become okay or complacent with always being distraught and or dysfunctional. There's also a risk of thoughts to desire others to suffer with us. It goes back to that old saying, misery loves company. And when we become so complacent with that attention, that sympathy, and that immunity to consequence to our own misconduct, we may even start fabricating scenarios to make us look like a victim when there's no scenario there to pinpoint a victimization that we've suffered. Now, this fabrication happens in a few ways. One of them is instigating, to which the person of the victim mindset will provoke another to anger toward them and then try to blow the whistle and make the whole situation look like the individual that they provoked is attacking them unjustly. So, a warning out to those, if you are being provoked, you need to have enough emotional resilience not to get caught in those kind of traps. Be the bigger person. Don't get caught in those traps, because that's exactly what's happening. You are being led into a minefield. Don't allow that to happen to you. So now another way that is oftentimes in fabrication. Manipulating others' words from their original context to sustain that victim image. Now, those in the victim mentality, you need to be very careful with this because you may be entering the realm of slander and also libeling. Now, what is slander? Slander is when you say words verbally that are not true and they can cause a person's image to be ruined. Libeling is basically when you document it, when you put it into some type of documentation. And know this, those are basically subsidiaries of what is called defamation. And you could be held legally responsible if it ever escalates to the judicial level. So I heavily advise you, do not ever try to manipulate somebody's words and twist their words from their original context and then go around broadcasting that kind of stuff to try to get other people to hate them. That is a civil offense, and you could be held legally responsible for their damages. Watch your mouth and watch your words and watch your interpretation as well. Because now you may be playing with a fire, you might not be able to put it out. Another form of fabrication, manipulating others by deceptive means to get them on your side, which is also the same as the other one. But in this particular case, it may not involve getting another person. It may not involve a second party. It may just involve you acting in emotional gestures and vocal expressions that are not necessarily genuine. You're just trying to create a scenario to get attention. And in some cases, some may actually do this by fabricating injuries. Now, some of you may have heard of this when a domestic partner uses cosmetic products to fake an injury. And they may do this to try to get their domestic partner in trouble, to which sometimes they actually use law enforcement to try to do that. But just know, if it is discovered, which it can be, that you do this, and you try to say this person committed a criminal act towards you, and you swear under oath that it's factual, and then they find out that it was not, you will be found guilty of perjury. And you can be held legally and criminally responsible for that. So I hope you're now connecting the dots here of how dangerous the victim mentality actually can be. Were there some validities to what happened to you to where you were victimized? Yes, but that does not give you the grounds to start fabricating scenarios. That's where the line is. You do not get to fabricate scenarios just because you've been victimized. Never cross that line. And of course, the final one, and as it mentioned before and all the rest of them, false testimony, untruthful stories or statements about an incident. So we just covered that. That's obviously slander, libeling, which is defamation, perjury, all that other stuff that lines up with this. And here's the crazy part. Usually people of a victim mentality are the same people who don't like to be manipulated, but yet here they are manipulating. So now we're in the issue of hypocrisy. Everything that the person of that victim mentality hated happening to them somehow has reconciled in themselves that it's okay now for it to happen to someone else. Could that be the misery effect of misery loves company? Could it be? Let's move on. Another issue. We may try to make it seem like our own misconduct within the victim's status is never our own fault, but the fault of others' misconduct. So now we're getting into the blame game. Well, I did this because they did that. And this kind of goes back to the issue of the individual who was provoked to anger, say, well, I did this because they did that. But was that the right way to handle it? Most likely it's not. And one of the reasons why some of us actually want to do this is because we have a desire to nullify accountability towards ourselves. Isn't that a twisted thing? We want to try to nullify accountability from ourselves. We want immunity from accountability but we want all accountability towards others. Folks, here is the red pill in this whole scenario. That's not how it works. We are all responsible for our own actions, even after we have been done wrong. That does not mean that we are allowed to continue doing wrong to ourselves. That person did wrong to us, but now we're doing wrong to ourselves. We're destroying our reputations, we're destroying our goodwill, and then we're trying to destroy the status quo that actually maintains stability. We have become a villain. So how can we sit here and say that we're different just because we've been victimized by villainism? If that's even a word. How can we say that? But yet we're doing the same thing. We have transitioned into hypocrisy. But we don't have to stay there. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to stay there. And we have the potential to move forward. We have the potential to grow. Even if we had made those poor decisions, we still have the ability to grow. So how do we fix this? Here's a few tips. There's probably more out there, but here are the ones that I came up with. We have to let go of the victim identity. We have to let go of the pain of the past. We must stop trying to keep people imprisoned in our mind who wronged us. And we have to cut loose the addictions to the victim accommodations. If we want to grow, we have to let the victim identity go. It's only going to hinder us because it yields dysfunction. Next, we have to choose to heal. What's a few ways we can do this? We are no longer relying on the elements that only provide relief, but instead rely on the elements that help us to move forward once and for all. Now, what are those forms of relief? It's what we said before, the attention, the sympathy, and receiving immunities for our misconduct. Those are all elements of relief. So what are the elements that help us to move forward? Well, it's just what we said before. Letting go of the victim identity. You survived the incident that occurred, and you have the potential to become even stronger and wiser. It is very unfortunate that those situations happen to us, but we don't have to stay there. Some of the cases, it may be that the individual who did this to us may have gotten away with it, but it only seems that way. Because I'll tell you, and some of us actually know this too. When we are doing stuff we're not supposed to be doing, how many of us have not looked over our shoulder? How many of us have not been paranoid whether or not we actually got caught or may still get caught? How many of us have not been in a state of paranoia as to whether or not we've covered up all of our tracks? So although the person may not have suffered actual consequence or may not have suffered it yet, but that person may be suffering some mental instability because of that. They just don't show it when they're out in public. They might not be sleeping as well as they want you to believe. Or maybe they actually tried to take you out, but they couldn't do it. So you're still here. And one of the best forms of revenge you can get on a person who it looks like they've gotten away is when you are progressing further than they are. But don't do it just to get revenge on them. Do it for yourself. So when you are prospering and you are growing, just by the fact that you're growing, that's enough to drive them crazy. Because they don't want you to grow. They want you to stay in that dysfunction. Another one, self-encouragement. Encourage yourself. Like I said before, You survived the incident and you're flourishing. Take joy in that. Reading, watching encouraging materials. Surrounding yourself with positive people. Setting and consistently meeting goals of growth. Refraining from material that would fuel the anger and despair that is probably knocking on your door inside your mind. And one way that helps me, and this is the reason I'm doing this right now, is sharing your story with others to help them. This whole series is just stuff that I have learned growing up, because I myself used to have a victim mentality. And I'm growing out of it because I'm tired of being angry, I'm tired of being depressed, and I'm tired of being dysfunctional. You have to get to a point where you are tired of being angry, you are tired of being depressed. I found that sharing things that I've learned to help others so they might not get caught up in the same minefields that I got caught up in, that's helping me to heal. One, I went through all of that because it helped to teach me to be a better person. But now if I can help someone with that experience so they may not be caught up in those minefields, that's a win in my book. And I hope these tips do. I pray that these tips do help you so that way you can avoid some trip-ups in your own life. So let's all do our part. Let's grow and be better. Because social vigilance is so needed right now, and it's long overdue. Go in peace, everyone.